Gemara says like this: we have Machloikis in the Gemara, Rabbi and the Chacham. If someone forgot to say b'fan nechtam, he gave the get without saying b'fan nechtam. Rabbi said the vlad is a mamzer. Chachamim say teitzei. You just have to get divorced without the vlad being a mamzer. So what do the Chachamim say? What should you do? You take it back and you give it again. That's what Chachamim say. Why can't you just say b'fan nechtam without taking and doing the whole shtick? Taking it back and giving it again. Pashtus, you learn that there's no nemanis without taking it back. Chazal only gave a nemanis to b'fan nechtam b'shas nesina b'shas ma'aseh gerushin. But if there's no ma'aseh gerushin happening, if you're not taking it back and giving it again, then the halacha is you're not neman. Why not? So Taisus Daf Pei Daled fills us in on what he doesn't write here, but he says in one teretz in Taisus there. Taisus says because there's an ikar medek daik only b'shas nesina. The whole reason why a shliach is neman to begin with more than a baal, if the baal is ma'ar later on, we believe the shliach over the baal, even though they're both one. Why is the shliach neman more than the baal? Because it's a medek daik. Where is the medek daik and when is the medek daik? The medek daik is only b'shas nesinas hagerishim, b'shas nesinas haget. So therefore, Chazal said that you're only neman to say b'fan nechtam. If you forgot to say b'fan nechtam, so in order to be neman again to say b'fan nechtam, you have to repeat the ma'aseh gerushin, and then you'll have a shas gerushin, a shas nesina, and then you'll have an amonis of b'fan nechtam again. That's why you need ketzad yasi yitlenan and v'yachzu yitnenala. That's called the
Eidim being there. Is that the reason? Is that the reason? Because the Eidim are there, shas nesina.
Not just because the Eidim are there, because that's Shas Gerushin, that's when the Gerushin is taking place. When the Gerushin is taking place, someone is, b'fnei Shnayim, you're saying because the b'fnei Shnayim, b'fnei Shloisha, right, that's included, that's b'fnei Shnayim, b'fnei Shloisha means. B'fnei Shnayim b'fnei Shloisha means because there's something happening at the time that you're doing it. If you're just going to say b'fnei Shnayim without anything happening, even if it's b'fnei Shnayim, b'fnei Shloisha, it's not going to help you. Besides the b'fnei Shnayim, b'fnei Shloisha, you need also a Ma'aseh Gerushin.
Right.
That's the Mikar Medek Taik. Not just the b'fnei Shnayim, b'fnei Shloisha, it's also because there's a Ma'aseh Gerushin happening. So, if you take 3 people afterwards, you don't do an asina again, you didn't, Yatzis Chayyab Efseid, you didn't do anything.
So why is that again? Why is it that he's only... I mean, I understand if it's just 2 and 3, because then he doesn't want to...
Right. The Mikar Medek Daik is only when he knows that he's going to give it in front of 2 or 3, B'shas the Gerushin. B'shas the Gerushin is taking place. That's what Taisva says. And therefore, if you're not repeating the Ma'aseh Gerushin, if you're not doing the Gerushin again, then you're not Neman, the Shlich is not Neman. That's Pashtus. But if you look in Rashi, something amazing, an amazing dik in Rashi. Rashi seems to say that there isn't a monos of b'fan nechtav, even if you forgot to say b'fan nechtav, b'shas t'nesim, you could say b'fan nechtav afterwards without having to repeat the whole ma'aseh. That's what Rashi says. Where does Rashi say that? Rashi in Reb Meir says, the Gemara asks, Reb Meir mishum d'lo yom b'fan nechtav yoytzi v'avlad mamzer. The Gemara says, the Rashi says, b'tmiyah v'haget kasheru or b'fan of nechtav. The Gemara's kasha is that it's a get kasher and it's b'fan of nechtav. What does Rashi mean b'fan of nechtav? He didn't say b'fan of nechtav. We're dealing in a case where he didn't say b'fan of nechtav to begin with. And the Gemara wants to know why, if he doesn't say b'fan of nechtav, is the vlad mamzer. So how does Rashi say in the kasha of the Gemara, how does Rashi put in, Rashi somehow inserts these 2 words, b'fan of nechtav, without having the shliach having said those words? How does Rashi know that that's what actually happened? The shliach didn't say that. So the Pnei Yeshua, the Chazim Sofer, they all say that Rashi learns that the kasha of the Gemara and Reb Meir, why the Vlad is a mamzer, is only once he said b'fan nechtav. But if he didn't say b'fan nechtav, the Gemara doesn't have a kasha. Because even the Chachamim agree that the Vlad is a mamzer if you don't say b'fan nechtav. And the Ran says it mefurish. This is the Pnei Yeshua and the Chazim Sofer say it on their own. But the Ran says it mefurish. The Ran says that according to the Chachamim that say the Vlad is not a mamzer, that's only as long as he said b'fan nechtav afterwards. The only thing that's missing is taking it back and giving it again. But the amiras b'fan nechtam definitely happened. That's the Ran says. But if there was no amira b'fan nechtam, then even the Chachamim agree that the Vlad is a mamzer. So Mamela is mafur like this, that according to the Chachamim, why do you need to take it again and give it again? It's not because otherwise you don't have a nemonis to say b'fan nechtam. The nemonis in b'fan nechtam is there regardless. Even if you don't do it again, even if you don't repeat the nesinas hagerishin, it's there regardless. So why do you have to take it back? Why do Chachamim say ketzad yasi yitlenan and v'yachzor v'yitnenula? Why do you need to give it again? If he said b'fan nechtav and he's never to say b'fan nechtav, otherwise the vlad would be a mamzer even according to the Chachamim. So why do the Chachamim learn that you have to give it again? So here the Chachamim agree to it's far over Meir because kol hamashanim mad beish tav Chachamim v'gittin vlad mamzer. They don't agree to the point of a vlad mamzer, but they agree that if you're mashana from the way Chachamim were masakin things, then something is wrong and you have to get divorced. So there are two dinim. The first thing is, if you don't say before the nechtam, the vlad is a mamzer. And even if you did say before the nechtam, the vlad won't be a mamzer anymore, but you'll still have to get divorced. Why? You said it before the nechtam, what's the problem? The answer is because there's something missing. Because there's no, you were Meshanim and Madbeya Shetavacham Bekin. You said it before the nechtam, and you were Neman, and the vlad is not a mamzer. But nevertheless, Teitzei. Why? Because you're Meshana from how the Chachamim instituted to say before the nechtam. You didn't say it at the right time. So in order to fix that problem, you have to give it again. You have to take it back and give it again. That's what's Mavur in the Ran and the Dik and Rashi, the way they play Yeshua and the Chazon learn Rashi. So there's an interesting thing. The Ran quotes Tosfos. The Ran says, Pirshu b'Tosfos, Dari Kamer, Keitzad Yasol Rabbanon Shaloi Teitzei, that she shouldn't have to get divorced. Avol Vlad Ein Tzarich Sheitlanem Mimena. The Kolshul Meid, as long as you're Meid, Afilu La'achar Nesina the Befanim Nechtav, Ein Choishesh Loi. We're not Choishesh. The less will call him Meshana Mavei Shtav Chom Gittin, because they don't hold Kol Meshana. Avlad Mamzer. They don't hold that Kol Meshana deems the Vlad Mamzer. We don't go that far. You don't say Kol Meshana makes the Vlad Mamzer. But if you didn't say Befanim Nechtav at all, there the Chachamim agree that the Vlad is a Mamzer. What does that mean? Why? Why would the Chachamim agree? The Ran learns the Chachamim will agree to Reb Meir that if there was no Befanim Nechtav said at all, then Avada the Vlad is a Mamzer. The only time the Chachamim argue with Reb Meir is if he said Befanim Nechtav. The only thing that was missing is that he didn't say it at the right time and the right place at the Shas Nesina. That's when the Chachamim argue and Reb Meir and say, well, just because he didn't say it at the right time, then we're not going to say the Vlad is a Mamzer. But if he didn't say it at all, then the Vlad is a Mamzer. What's the pshat of that? Why would the Chachamim agree that the Vlad is a Mamzer if there was no Befanim Nechtav said at all? So we spoke about this a few times already. That the Ran and Rashi learn that once Chazal are Misakin, Befanim Nechtam, and this is where the Achronim bring this raya. This is a very stark raya, very strong raya from this Ran and Rashi. That once Chazal said you have to say Befanim Nechtam, then we treat the get as if it's Mezuyif. We treat the get as if it's Mezuyif. As long as we don't know that the get is a kosher get, we can't accept the get and the Vlad is a Mamzer. It's a Chashash Ziyuf. But once you said Befanim Nechtam, so we took away the Chashash Ziyuf, so now all that's left is, because you did something wrong, because you didn't say it at the right time. So for that, Chachamim said, we're not going to treat the Vlad as a Mamzer, we'll only say Teitzei. But if you didn't say Befanim Nechtam at all, this is the key. Rashi learns that without Befanim Nechtam, we treat the get as if it's Mezuyif. But although the Ran quotes Tosfos, if you look in Tosfos by us, Tosfos doesn't say that. The Ran must quote a different Tosfos, because our Tosfos clearly is Mavur, not like that. Tosfos says, Keitzad Yasa, Pirish, Keitzad Yasa l'Rabbanon, Shetinos l'Katchila Yemesish l'Teitzei, Avol Vlad, Tosfos says, Ain't Tzarich Takana. Tosfos says, but for the Vlad, Chachamim hold that you don't need anything. Ain't Tzarich Takana means nothing. From Tosfos, it's mashma, you don't even need a Befanim Nechtav in order for the Vlad not to be a Mamzer. Even without a Befanim Nechtav, the Vlad is not a Mamzer. So, there's a basic machlokes Rishonim here, if Mother Rishonim as well, but I'm just trying to keep it on the Omid. A basic machlokes Rishonim, whether, if one doesn't say Befanim Nechtam at all, do we say that the get is Mezuyif, and the Chacham will agree to Reb Meir that because of the Chashash Ziyuf, the Vlad is a Mamzer? Or do we say, if you don't say Befanim Nechtam at all, okay, the Vlad is not a Mamzer, there's no real Chashash Ziyuf here. So, all you need is Teitzei. So what is that machlokes? And that's what we said before, and just to repeat it one more time. The machlokes is that once Chachamim said to say Befanim Nechtam, so now if you didn't say it, do we treat the get as if it's Mezuyif until you say it, or not? Rashi and the Ran learns, yes. Tosfos says Mavur, Ain't Tzorich Takana means, is the mashmos of Tosfos, you don't need anything, not even an Amira of Befanim Nechtam, the Vlad is never a Mamzer. And the reason is because Tosfos learns that once there was sakin of Befanim Nechtam, the whole tikkun was only because of the Irur Abal, but there's no actual Chashash Ziyuf ever. Right? The Gemara says the reason is because Irur Abal. Just Rashi and the Ran learned, although the reason was Irur Abal, but once they instituted that, they were Chashash for Ziyuf. So now once we have this clear, this is all in Rava, right? But the emes, if you look at the Beis and Beis carefully, you'll see that even in Rabbah, there's a machlokes Rashi and Tosfos. Lamaskonas HaGemara. What exactly was the Chashash after V'Rabbanon Da'atzrach? Rashi V'Rabbanon Da'atzrach, Rashi says something amazing. Rashi is V'Rabbanon Da'atzrach, the last Rashi in that Beis and Beis. Rashi says V'Rabbanon Da'atzrach L'Mechesh L'Mosa. There's an actual Chashash going on that perhaps it wasn't written in the Shema. And Tosfos already asks in the beginning of the sugya, how could there be an actual chashash that it wasn't written lishma? The Gemara says the reason why you have to save it from the nechtam is because of ir rabal, not because there's an actual chashash. It's only because we're afraid the baal is maharit. And that's why Tosfos of Gimel and Aleph learns that the only reason why you have to save it from the nechtam according to Rabbi is not because of a real chashash. It's because Kadesh Ya'ara Baal v'Yoymar, the Baals going to come later say and make up a story that the Sefer didn't know about Lishma. But not because there's an actual chashash in Rashi. Rashi says something else. So Rashi is shver. The Gemara says not like Rashi. The Gemara says Taima my dilma osabala ma'ara. The Gemara doesn't say because it's a real chashash. So again, here Rashi is also mavur. That of course the reason why Chazal instituted before nechtam was because of ir rabal. But once they instituted before nechtam, they treat it like as if it's a real chashash here, and that's what Rashi says for Rabbanu da'atzrich because there's a real chashash. That's the way we look at it. So now, if you learn this is a machlokes Rashi in Tosfos and even in Rabbah, so now you come to the next sugya. It's beautiful. Look at the next sugya. The Gemara says, Rabbi Lozer says, I feel like kosav. The last line in the famous days. The Gemara says, I feel like kosav by eloshita achas lishma. Right? Ein tzarich. All you need when a shliach watches a get being written, how much of the get does he have to watch being written lishma, and how much doesn't he have to watch of the get being written lishma? So Tosfos says on this line of the Gemara, Rabbi Lozer says only one line. So Tosfos says, to mistama, once you see one line being written lishma, mistama simu lishma. And the kasha is, what do you mean mistama simu lishma? How does the mistama help? You need a goddess edus that the get was written lishma. How does the mistama help for a goddess edus? Perhaps he wrote the first line, not the second line. How do you know that the whole get was written lishma? So if you take a look at Rashi in Daf Tezvav, Rashi says not like that. Rashi says in the first Rashi of the Gemara in Daf Tezvav, Rashi says shita achas. The Gemara there quotes Rabbi Lozer, and Rashi says shita achas. Rashi says shita rishayna. Rashi says something totally different. Rashi says that because Shita Rishayna, that's where the Ikra get is. The Ranas Moisev, the Izna Reit Muteris L'Chalodam is there. The Rashash asks, how does everything fit into one line? Okay, fine. But Shita Achas means the Ikra get, the Torah Faget is all in that line. And that's why it's enough Shita Achas. So it's not because once you have Shita Achas, you could assume that the rest of the get was written Lashma. Rashi says the reason why Shita Achas is enough is because Shita Achas, that is the get. Machlokes Rashi tells us what Shita Achas means. Perhaps it's totally in how to understand the Geder Atakana. If you learn that the Geder Atakana was that once Chazal were matzrach to save it for the nechtam because of the Ir Habal, they treat it as if there's a real chashash l'shma, then of course, like Rashi learns, then of course you have to watch the whole get being written l'shma. Because if we're treated like as if it's a real chashash that it wasn't written l'shma, we have to watch the whole get being written l'shma. But Tosfos learns that there's no real chashash on the l'shma. Tosfos learns it's only chashash ir rabal because the Baal is going to claim that he was unaware that you have to write it l'shma. So Tosfos says that as soon as you see the first line, he begins writing l'shma. Mistama simu l'shma. He can't anymore refute this get and say that he didn't know about it. So Tosfos l'shitasa, the mistama simu l'shma, is because he understood that the gzeira was of ir because of ir rabal, and that's it. But Rashi, who took it a step further, Rashi said that the gather of the gzeira was because we treated it like a real chashash, like Rashi in the Bezim and Beis says. Therefore, Rashi requires you to see the entire get, and that's what Rashi needs to learn. Shita Achas means Ishva Isha V'Hazman. It's so late. I'm just going to finish off with one last thing. The next Gemara is also beautiful. Rashi says, Rashi Omar, Afilu kan komas and kan megilta. Right? Rashi says, even kan komas and kan megilta. You see in Rashi, two pshatim in Rashi. What is kan komas and kan megilta? Rashi first says, Tikkun akomas v'aklaf. He heard when he was misakin, he cut the papers. Right, I guess you couldn't buy ready-made paper like you can buy today. You had to make the klaf. I'm saying, no, it's not you have to make the klaf. I'm saying you couldn't buy ready-made klaf either. Today you could buy ready-made klaf. Anyways, you had to be ma'abed the klaf. So while the Sefer was ma'abed the klaf, he was choytechet and he was machliket. That's when he heard. Because Rashi explains, he heard him say that he's going to write it l'shma. The second pshat in Rashi says something else. V'li nira, Rashi doesn't like that pshat. V'li nira, kan komas akana kol komas kshu koisev. Rashi says over there that what's the difference between the first pshat and the second pshat in Rashi? The first pshat is that he heard him prepare the get l'shma, and therefore you could assume the mistama simu l'shma, that when he wrote it, he actually wrote it l'shma as well, like Tosfos says. But Rashi doesn't like that l'shitasa, because Rashi says you have to hear the l'shma on the etzem ksiva, because if there's a real chashash l'shma like he learns, if we treat it like a real chashash l'shma, then you have to actually hear the ksiva that it was being written l'shma, and that's what Rashi says. The second pshat, we never know that kan kulmasan means that he actually heard as he was writing the get that he heard him say that it's l'shma. That's also l'shitasa. Again, so now Tosfos says kan kulmasan. Tosfos says Tosfos is ma'ira kasha here, and we'll finish off with that. Tosfos says Loy dami l'suma. Taiz has the kasha. The Mishnah Daf Chav Gimel says that a suma that brings a get is possible. The Gemara says, why is a suma? Why can't the suma bring a get? He's a bardas. What's wrong with the suma? Just can't see. The Gemara says because he can't say befonai nechtav. The problem with saying befonai nechtav, he's a suma. So Taisva says, what do you mean? Our Gemara says you don't have to see the etzem ksiva. You could just hear it. A suma can hear just as well as a normal person, maybe even better. His hearing skills, his hearing, is much better than a person that could see. So what's the problem? So Taisva is loy dami. It's not daima. Taisva doesn't explain why not. The Rosh brings two pshatim. The Rosh says one reason is because even though all you have to do is hear it, but you have to see it beforehand, and you have to be makar b'tviyasayin afterwards. It's not just enough if you hear it. There's an important point in the Gemara missing, according to the Rosh, that you have to also see the piece of paper, whatever the klaf, that the Sefer started writing the get on, and then afterwards be makar b'tviyasayin, that's this exact same klaf that you saw beforehand, and al karchach was written l'shma on this klaf. Asuma can't do that, and that's why Asuma is possible obvious again. The other teretz the Rosh says is because of nirika shakran. You say before a nechtav, Asuma can't see. It's nirika shakran, so therefore Asuma can't see before a nechtav. The Bishmul and Simon Kofman Beis asks a bomb kashi blibes tzorchin on this Rosh and Antois is both. He says, "What do you mean ledomi l'suma? I have a pashta teretz. You know why it's ledomi l'suma? Because although there's a heter of shama kalkomus by before nechtav but ksiva, but the chasima you have to really see. If you're going to say before nechtam, what is before nechtam for? Before nechtam is for kiyam. For the kiyam I get. The whole heter of shama kan komus of a kamigilta is only for the ksivas I get. But for the chasimas, avadi, you have to see the chasimas, because what is before nechtam? For nechtam is an actual kiyam. What's a kiyam? A kiyam means they're makar the chasimas. They know the chasimas. To know the chasimas, you have to see the chasimas. So how could Taisvas in the Rosh give other terutzim? It sounds like the Taisvas in the Rosh that shama koila komus v'koil the kan megilta are even enough for the chasimas, for the before nechtam as well, and that's why they couldn't answer that to differentiate between sumo and the regular person. Otherwise, they could have just said this pashta teretz. The Beishmul hiniach b'tzorach. But the Marit in Shuvas, he brings a fantastic teretz. He says like this. He says that the before nechtam, the kiyum of before nechtam. Why do we need a kiyum of before nechtam? Because we're afraid of Ura Baal. What's the Baal going to say? Baal's going to say, I didn't send them. Lo shalachtem, right? I didn't send them. So we know by Suya Beitrei, we know that Tosha says, what's a Suya Beitrei? Suya Beitrei means that they could just be made that the Baal sent us. That means that as soon as we know that the Baal sent him, that's already enough of a kiyum. That refutes the Ura Baal of Lo shalachtem, right? As soon as I know that Shulchan, the Baal can't be ma'ar and say that they were Mezayafit, because I know that they were Shluchim. So the kiyum is not done by oifen other kiyumim are done in shtoris that they're makar the chasimas. The kiyum basically before nechtam, the kiyum of before nechtam is done in a oifen where through the before nechtam we'll know that they're shluchim. As long as we know from the before nechtam it's nizbarer that the Baal sent them, that's enough of the kiyum to refute the Ira Baal, and that's the whole purpose of the Tukkan of before nechtam, to refute the Ira Baal. So that's why the Marit says that even if he didn't see the chasimas, if he just heard the Edom sign it, he heard the Baal being mitzvah to Edom to sign it, and then the Baal gave them this very paper that they were the Shama Koyla Komas of a Kan Begilta, then it's also an amonis of a Baal Shalach, a Baal Shalach, the Baal sent us. Why? Because they're Meidik Daik. They're Meidik Daik on that just as much as they're Meidik Daik if they would have seen it. Because they know that later on they're going to have to say before nechtam. As soon as they know they're going to have to say before nechtam later on, they're made the gdaik at the time that the Baal would sava these Edom to sign, even without actually seeing the signatures. So the kiyum here is just a kiyum to refute the Ira Baal of Lo Shalachtem, and they could say now that before nechtam they're made the gdaik and we'll know that the Baal sent them. So it's not that they have to see it. Lamaisa, the Rambam, the Shulchan Aruch, the Tur, all the Rishonim argue. They say that you see, look at Shulchan Aruch inside. Shulchan Aruch says Koila Kolmas v'Koil Megilta only helps for the ksiva. But for Chasima, Avada, they have to see the Chasima, but Chila v'Atzoif, it doesn't help anything else. But the Beis Shmuel is asking from Tosfos and the Rosh, it's Mavur, that even on the Chasimas, it helps Koila, can Komas of the Kamigilta. Otherwise, what's the Kasha from Suma? The fact they're asking from Suma, they're looking for all different types of Terutzim, must be that they hold that even for the Chasimas, it helps Kan Komas of the Kamigilta. The question is, how could it help? Right? If you need Kiyum, you have to be Makar the Chasimas. The Before Nechtam is there for Kiyum. The Kiyum, you have to be Makar the Chasimas. And the Marit says, no. The Kiyum here is that we have to know that they were made a Gdaik that the Baal sent them. As long as they have Before Nechtam, which is Mayit, that they heard the Baal being Mitzvah the Edom, and then the Baal gave them over the get, then they're Nem. The Baal can't be Ma'ar anymore. So that's only according, I'm just bringing this out, that's only according to Shittas HaTosfos. That Tosfos learns that the only tikkun was, the B'fana Nechtam was only because of the Ur Rabal, but according to Rashi, the Rashi learns that once they're Mesakin B'fana Nechtam, we treat it like a real Chashash Ziyav, then of course you need a real Kiyum. You have to be Makar Chasimas. It's not just enough that the Baal sent them. We're treated like a real Kiyum. And that's why the Rambam, the Torah Shulchan Aruch will learn that you need to see the Chasimas Metchil Levat Zayif. It wouldn't help them. It's only Tosfos L'Shitasai. Okay. Excellent. Sei gewünscht.